So good morning. I want to welcome you all to the Access to Transit panel. Thank you for everyone who's here in Durham and everyone who's participating online. My name is Erik Landfried. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a board member for BikeDurham, which is a nonprofit organization that believes that everyone should have access to safe, affordable, and sustainable transportation, regardless of who they are or where they live. I also manage the Transit Equity Campaign here in Durham, which holds the public agencies in charge of updating the Durham Transit Plan accountable to make sure that the needs of current transit riders, transit workers, and low-wealth BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color communities, are the first priorities in that plan update. Access to transit, and particularly for those walking, biking, or rolling, is critical to ensuring a sustainable and equitable transportation system. I'm very excited that the City of Durham is working on improving access to transit. You will hear about one of the projects currently underway on Fayetteville Street, which is just one block away from the site of this summit. I hope many of you, at least those here in person, will join us for a mobile tour of Fayetteville Street, which begins at 1 p.m. today. I've been encouraged that many transportation planners and engineers have moved beyond traffic safety campaigns to recognize that the way that our streets are designed must change to prevent traffic violence and make it more attractive for people to get out of their cars and trucks and use more sustainable modes such as walking, cycling, rolling, and using transit. I'm also encouraged that there's a growing recognition that our transportation system was created through a history of decisions that have led to inequitable outcomes along racial lines. John Talmadge earlier this morning gave this fact, but I'm going to repeat it because I think it's really important. Every 21 days, someone is seriously injured or killed walking or biking in Durham, and those that are hit and killed are disproportionately Black and brown. I think that's a really important fact. But the safety improvements should not stop with the physical infrastructure. You're going to hear about some of those, and those are very important. But through the Transit Equity Campaign and other efforts in Durham, many people have talked about other types of barriers as they walk, bike, roll, or use transit, including the fear of crime, and harassment by other people or law enforcement. It is critical to do equitable engagement for all transportation plans and projects. The people who use the local transportation network every day know those streets the best and often identify challenges and opportunities that planners or engineers might miss. It is also critical to move outside of our silos to identify solutions that lead to more equitable outcomes, whether these solutions have traditionally been done in your department or in a different department. So the way that we will do the panel today is that we're going to hear from each of our panelists first. I'll introduce each one of them before they speak. And then we're going to have a roundtable discussion that will include, hopefully, some of your questions. So be thinking about your questions. You can submit them online if you are participating virtually. Otherwise, just hold on to them in your brain. And when we get to the end of having each panelist speak, we'll take those questions and start the discussion. So without further ado, I will introduce our first panelist, and that is Sean Egan. Sean joined the City of Durham in November of 2019 as Director of Transportation. Almost 2 years, 2 years now, exactly. Yeah. It is November, isn't it? The city's Department of Transportation is responsible for local and regional transportation planning, traffic operations, parking, and transit. He previously served in state, local, and regional government positions in the budget, transit, and transportation agencies of the state of Maryland and in Washington, D.C. at the District Department of Transportation and Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or most people know it as WMATA. And I'll turn it over to you, Sean. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Erik. And I'm really excited that Durham is playing host. So welcome to Durham for those of you visiting us. I hope you enjoy your time here and that you patronize all of our local small businesses while you're here. So as Erik said, I'm about 2 years in this week as Director of Transportation for the City of Durham. And I'm really excited about the work that, it's funny, we're very much on the same page about the work that we're doing on equitable community engagement in the City of Durham. So the Transportation Department has partnered with neighborhood improvement services and community partner organizations here in Durham to ensure that transportation plans and projects benefit from input from communities that were historically excluded from the decision-making process. So here in Durham, just steps from where we meet today, we live with the shameful history of the destruction of the Hayti community, established in 1868 by Reverend Egan Markham, an African-American Methodist Episcopal missionary and former slave. So the Durham Freeway could offer quick and easy transportation primarily for white commuters. We also know that there are examples like the Crest Street neighborhood near Duke University Hospital, where communities effectively advocated for their priorities and mitigated the harm caused by the Durham Freeway. Our challenge today is to move beyond harm mitigation, to intentionally seek input from communities before decisions are made to maximize the benefit for communities starved of resources over decades through previous transportation plans and projects. So one of our primary efforts in the City of Durham is to improve the GoDurham transit system. I want to share some key demographic information about our GoDurham riders. More than 80% of our riders are people of color. Nearly 75% of them have incomes below $25,000 a year, and more than 2/3 live in a zero-car household. So transit is their transportation. In a recent presentation to the City Council, I concluded with the recommendation that given the demographics of GoDurham riders and the city's focus on equity and looking at funding decisions through a race equity lens, there's no better transportation investment to promote equity than improving GoDurham services and infrastructure. So with the support of the Durham County Transit Plan that we're updating right now, this work is advancing, including the launch last year of 15-minute service on the Fayetteville Street corridor, all the way from downtown Durham Station to the South Point Mall. We're now looking at how do we pair transit priority infrastructure with that additional frequency and our investments in a 15-minute or better frequent service network. So we're now underway with what we call the Better Bus Project, which is a collection of initiatives to enable the development of our major transit corridors and needs across the city. So the Fayetteville Street Emphasis Corridor that we'll be doing a walking tour of later today, the Holloway Street Emphasis Corridor, which is our highest ridership corridor in the city. We're looking at pedestrian access to bus stops, bus speed and reliability, where buses are getting slowed down or held up, and it's costing our riders time. And a series of other initiatives that are rooted in community engagement where we know we need improvements. So the goal of these projects, and what we'll be talking about during the walking tour, is really to transform the experience of our GoDurham bus riders. High quality infrastructure along major corridors, bus stops, benches, shelters, sidewalk and crosswalk connections, and safety improvements that prioritize pedestrians and transit riders. Our bus speed and reliability will work to advance recommendations from previous studies to see how we can give advantage to buses, particularly in the area around Durham Station. We see, before COVID, we were seeing about 15,000 trips a day at Durham Station. So any advantage that we can give for bus riders coming in and out of Durham Station is going to have significant dividends for those 15,000 trips. And so as we are working to update the Durham County Transit Plan, we continue to make the case that GoDurham service and infrastructure are an incredible opportunity to direct resources to communities of color, to low-wealth households with limited transportation options, communities historically underserved or harmed by transportation projects and programs. So really excited to have the opportunity to walk the Fayetteville Street corridor, to talk to you about some of the preliminary recommendations that we have for the corridor, and to share our interest in continuing this work. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Our next presenter or panelist is Angel Dozier. Angel Isett is a creative strategist, conceptual teaching artist, and an urban visionary, having contributed to writing ed curriculum at the Ferguson uprisings in 2014. This work led to establishing Be Connected Durham and Beyond, a community education initiative that addresses disparities, fosters equity, connects audiences, and bridges access gaps using the arts, culture, and live music as the vehicle for socio-political change. Angel Isett has 19 years of experience integrating science, technology, and the arts across K through 12 disciplines and learning intelligences, a skill that has served as the foundation for Be Connected Durham. Her love for both the arts and sciences has driven her career in education and STEAM curriculum development within public and independent school systems. Her current project is Live, with an exclamation point, from the Fayetteville Street corridor, which we will visit at 1 o'clock, a third Friday art and business walk implementation series in the historic Hayti district. As a general practice for life and work balance, Angel walks and bikes to most places. Angel.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Again, I am Angel Isett Dozier. Make a little adjustment. And I'm the founder of Be Connected Durham. What we're doing right now is building the Fayetteville Street Corridor Fellowship with community residents here living on the Fayetteville Street Corridor, which we are calling the historic Hayti community, because that is what it is, even from this area across the bridge where Pettigrew Street is. If you don't know, that area was considered the downtown of the Hayti district and the place where Black Wall Street originated. We know that very effective systems were in place during this time. It's the area where the Carolina Times started, as well as Hargett and Scarborough funeral services. And there are many, many stories and businesses and organizations that originated in that area when St. Joseph A&E Church was also a prominent figure and a place where people could convene to do amazing work in the community and contribute to the city. So, about the Fayetteville Street Corridor Fellowship. What we're doing, we created Live from the Fayetteville Street Corridor an art and business walk, in order to engage our neighbors in a type of celebration. So one of the things that we've been able to do as we canvass the community and get feedback from the residents here on the Fayetteville Street corridor is we've been able to take action based on the feedback that we get. We share it with Neighborhood Improvement Services, and then we determine how to take action in a way that is informed by residents. You'll hear a lot more about that later on, I'm sure, during the panel discussion. But it's really important to mention that we canvass in a way that we are also recruiting more fellows for the project. And these fellows, along with their neighbors, they already have the trust of their neighbors, they put into action these various things, like creating Third Friday. One piece of feedback that we got was that a lot of residents, particularly this particular resident in McDougall Terrace, had gone to a Third Friday event downtown Durham and didn't feel welcome or represented, or had a hard time just communicating with people and feeling unwelcome. So we decided that what we would do was bring the arts and Third Friday to the residents, right where they are, right where the space is already culturally abundant. And again, I'll talk a lot more about that, but we officially launched the project on Juneteenth to align with the City of Durham and Durham County's first observance of Juneteenth as a holiday. And we've been really successful within a short time because that information and the building of these systems comes directly from the recommendations that residents make. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Angel Isett. Next, we have Phillip Vereen. Phillip serves as the Transportation Director at North Carolina Central University, or NCCU. He was appointed to this role in May of 2020. Prior to coming to NCCU, Phillip served with the North Carolina Department of Transportation for 7 years in the roles of Senior Transportation Consultant and Assistant Director of the Public Transportation Division. He has held other career positions at the local government level with the City of Winston-Salem Department of Transportation, the Piedmont Regional Council, and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in the areas of transportation planning, economic development, and law enforcement. Phillip has previously held positions as the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce, in the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce, including as Vice President of Government Relations. He was recently involved in the development of the American Tobacco Campus, the development of the streets at South Point Mall, and securing federal funding for the construction of the American Tobacco Trail. Mr. Vereen is a proud Durham native. He graduated from Hillside High School, which is just down the street on Fayetteville Street, in 1993, and is a two-time graduate of North Carolina Central University with an undergraduate degree in political science with a concentration in public administration and a graduate degree in geography and earth science. And he is a certified geographic information systems professional. So welcome, Phillip.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. What can I say? We're excited about this project from the university standpoint, and as I get started, I want to give you a couple of statistics about North Carolina Central University, where we are now, and how it plays into this project. At the current enrollment of our university right now is 8,500 students, a little over 8,500 students. That includes graduate and undergraduate students. We also have at the university about roughly 1,200 full-time staff, faculty and staff employees, and about another 350 contractors / part-time faculty and staff as well. The university, if you've been by the campus, there's been a series of large construction projects over the last probably 3 or 4 years. Last year we opened 2 dorms, expansive dorms. this coming January, we're opening yet another dorm on Lawson Street. And as I saw Sean last night, Sean came to the grand opening of our new student center on campus. And of course, if you come via Austin Avenue to the campus, you will now see the construction of the new School of Business. In fact, there's several cranes over there putting steel in place to frame the building. And there are going to be several other smaller projects that will be coming online, as I mentioned, in the next few months, but also in the next year, year and a half. So what does that mean for connecting with transit? What does it mean for connecting to the community? Well, if we go back a step further, certainly with Hayti, they would not, without Hayti and without the historical context of this community, it would not be in North Carolina Central University. So as this university goes, we have a balance to not only connecting to our neighboring communities, but we also have a challenge and responsibility to making sure that the students who come here to get an education, that they're connected with this community during their time here as well. And one of the things that we're also seeing just related to transit, we're seeing students who are coming to us from different just geographies. So for example, we have students who come from Baltimore or Philadelphia or Washington, places where they have increased frequency of service. As Sean alluded to earlier, that 15-minute frequency has been a hit because that's something that they see in urban areas or larger cities across the country, and they're coming here. A young lady the other day from St. Louis said the same thing, that they're glad to see that. So you have that student who comes from that area. You also have the unique challenge of students who come from less populated, more rural settings, like a young lady I met the other day from Robeson County. She's familiar with transit, but the transit system in Robeson County, the thing you have to realize, Robeson County is one of the largest counties in the state. So there's certainly a delay if you have to make reservations, but certainly they're getting acclimated to a newer setup in Durham as a student here on campus. So we're having to spend time to connect with them on how to utilize GoDurham or Go Triangle when they connect downtown. So it's an education piece that we're having to connect our students to as well. But overall, the connection and the key point that we're definitely interested in how transit can better serve our students, but also how the university can play a better role in, as we design and build out a campus, how do we play a role into designing features like a bus pull-out in certain areas or a decorative shelter, those kind of things that make transit not only more attractive to our students, but the area in and around the university campus as well. And then ultimately, we can attract more economic development, more small business. We can be a catalyst and a partner to it, and not necessarily the university becoming, in some ways, a barrier. And so that's what we're trying to kind of, I call it a good tension or a good dance between those areas. Connecting the past, connecting the future, but also making sure that there's a linkage, and a bridge at the same time to the next 20 years or beyond, as far as where the university is going to grow, but grow in a way that is integrated into what both panelists have already mentioned, connecting and building a new legacy. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Phillip. Our final panelist is Joseph Furstenberg. He is the statewide programming and policy unit manager with the Integrated Mobility Division of the North Carolina Department of Transportation, and he's hopefully going to explain what all of those words mean. Joseph has served as a transportation professional with NCDOT since 2018, coordinating statewide multimodal policy and facility design for all state-funded highway projects and non-highway projects. Joseph manages the statewide programming and policy unit of the Integrated Mobility Division, overseeing the project review and Complete Streets program, Safe Routes to School program, transit prioritization projects, TAP-funded projects and programs, and other multimodal programs, projects, and research initiatives. Joseph also serves on the leadership of the North Carolina chapter of the Association for Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. Prior to his role at NCDOT, Joseph served as the Economic Development planner for the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. Joseph's educational background includes a Master's of Public Administration from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where he was a Marvin Hoffman Scholar, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from North Carolina State University. A Rockingham County native, Joseph has a long-standing appreciation for trails and the community and economic development opportunities that exist because of investment in trails and multimodal infrastructure. All right, Joseph.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. If I'd known you were going to read all that, I would have shortened it up for you, but I appreciate it. And hopefully I can explain a little bit about what some of those words meant, what integrated mobility is. So actually, I think it was probably 3 years ago at the BikeWalkNC Summit when Julie and Hannah at the time, who was the director of the Bike and Pedestrian Division, announced the merger of the Bike and Pedestrian Division and the Public Transit Division at NCDOT. And that new name's merged division is integrated mobility. And so there's a lot of reasons that factored into merging those two divisions, which has already proven to be the right move. But you know, the landscape of mobility is evolving across the state, especially in our urban areas. You know, 3-4 years ago, we saw scooters pop up all over the place. They're still hanging around. There's other things in other larger urban cities that we've seen, gas-powered scooters that you can rent, and all sorts of things that will come in and disrupt, you know, the normal flow of things, you might say. So, you know, so to address that and to break down the silos within the Bike and Ped and the public transit divisions, but also to, you know, fully integrate those practices. And so that's one of the major reasons that we merged those divisions, and that is what has come to be the Integrated Mobility Division. And as Eric said, I'm on the statewide side of that. We have a regional side that is where more of our planning team is, that work with the MPO and RPO partners. We also have an innovations and data side of the division, which is a new part of the division. Just recently hired on some staff for that, so very excited for some new projects that will come from that side of the division. But really just a full restructuring to bring together the two divisions and to bring together our efforts in everything from planning to design, you know, even for working with our partners. And you'll see in today's program for the summit, you'll see that there's a new map that Integrated Mobility has come out with our new regions. And so we developed those regions, again, merging both divisions to have a contact for each region for the municipalities, the public transit agencies, whoever it may be, for planning, grants administration, safety and compliance, and so that way that there is a point person and a team that is assigned to a region, so that all those things that are sort of you sort of take them for advantage or don't think about them in terms of how to make some of these projects happen sometimes. It really is a great benefit to have your team working together and everybody on the same page. So yeah, happy to be here and talk about that, and certainly the ways that transit has been integrated into, you know, how we approach things, especially, you know, with complete streets, you know, bringing together, you know, not only thinking about transit, but how you get to the transit stops and where you go when you get off the bus, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's just been a great partnership, and it allows for more projects like, you know, the Fayetteville Street project to come about. And so, you know, one thing that we'd like to do, especially is, you know, we have a lot of momentum in our urban counties, but we also want to spread this momentum to our more rural areas, cities and towns and counties, to show the advantages of transit in those areas as well. So, like I said, very, very excited to be here and happy to participate.
All right, great. Thank you, Joe. So we're going to move into more of the roundtable kind of questions and answers portion of the panel. For those who are participating virtually, this would be a good time to start getting your questions in if you have any for our panelists. I am going to start with a few questions that I had sent to the panelists in advance of this, and then we'll take questions from the audience here in Durham and from those online. And some of these are a little pointed perhaps towards certain panelists, and I will start with those. But anyone can weigh in on any of these questions that come up for sure. So I'm going to start with Sean. Go back to the beginning, and I guess this is born out of a concern or a criticism from a lot of people in Durham, and I'm sure throughout the state, about the speed at which projects actually get delivered. And so I guess the question is, what is being done to ensure that once planned, a project like the one that's being designed right now on Fayetteville Street, that they are built in a timely manner.
So I think the short answer to the speed question is that the speed with which we're delivering projects is inadequate right now. We have great ambition about what we want to accomplish. We have resources in terms of dollars, investments, awards through the Durham County Transit Plan. And now it's really incumbent upon the city to take the steps to build the project delivery capacity that we need in order to really rise up to the ambition that we have, the resources that we have available. So some of the things that we're doing, that we've done over the last year, have been, to bring on a consultant team for the Better Bus project. We've also brought on a project management consulting team to augment the work of our staff, to review deliverables, coordinate collection of comments across multiple different departments in the city. A lot of that communication, coordination, review work is very time intensive. And our staff, we've really pushed our staff to the limits of what they can do. We really need to augment that staff with some support as well as additional positions. So we do have an additional position that was added to our budget this year that is a planner position, principal planner, that's focused on transit project delivery, and in particular with a strong focus on projects like the Better Bus, Fayetteville, Holloway, bus access, but also coordination with our partners at Go Triangle. We have 946 bus stops here in Durham, most of which are little more than a signpost in the dirt. We have a very ambitious agenda to, right now we're delivering about 25 bus stop improvements a year. We're trying to grow that to 75 and beyond. But we've got this huge backlog of accessibility improvements, basic 5-foot by 8-foot wheelchair ADA landing area, a connection to a safe crosswalk. Really simple but critically important access improvements. So we're growing our staff. We're having good discussions with our partners about how we continue to grow our project delivery capacity. Unless we find ways to really significantly grow that, we're going to continue to fall short of the promises that we've made. So we're lining up partnerships with, for example, the city's General Services Department to do a revitalization of the platform area at Durham Station. So we're submitting a federal grant application for that project. It would greatly improve the platform area. Right now, 20% of that is covered. It would grow that to 80% of the platform area covered. There would be walkways, more seating areas, restrooms on the platform for folks who are making a tight connection at the station, customer information. So we're kind of trying to grow our capacity within transportation, utilize the capacity of partners like Go Triangle, which has done an outstanding job in taking on the bus stop improvement project, and then working with partner agencies like General Services. But growing that project delivery capacity is a critical need, and we're still working to solve it because we really want to live up to the promise of what we can accomplish.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to share? Now, Joe, if you have any thoughts on.
From a department's perspective, just to add to that a little bit, so, and I won't take credit for this at all because it wasn't anything that our division led, but another acronym for you, IPD, which is Integrated Project Delivery, is a new system that a couple years ago, probably about 3 years ago, and I'm sure the planning for it started before then, was developed to basically streamline project development within the department and really bring a map. There's a giant flow chart. If you've seen it, it's massive and it has lots of colors and blocks on it. But it's extremely helpful in getting a full understanding of what are all the steps required through project delivery. And I know one thing that really will impact the timeline is where the money's coming from. If it's federal money, then there's additional things we have to do, to make sure that everything is by the book and all the, surveys and everything happens that way. So that, that can also play into it a little bit. But so that process, the IPD process, has really helped streamline the project delivery and in terms of getting a full picture of what all needs to happen and at what stage it needs to happen. And then for IMD, for the Integrated Mobility Division, we actually have an active project right now that we're developing a feasibility studies program. And NCDOT does have a feasibility studies program, but this program will be focused on bike ped and transit projects. And so that is often one of the limitations of bike ped and transit projects is that they, we have great plans and, everything is figured out in terms of what we want and what we desire for that location. But in terms of getting a project from that planning stage to project development is that feasibility part that misses, in between those two steps. And, making sure that, what are the things that if we start digging we might find, all the fun things that come into play there. And also gives you, once a feasibility study is complete, you also have a much better picture of, what does the budget truly need to be for this, how much more public engagement we're going to need to do. All those things that can really, when you get into project development, if you haven't accounted for, can delay you because you've got to turn around and make sure you do those things. So just a couple additional steps that, from the department side we're taking to try to help expedite that process.
All right, great. Next question is, I guess, aimed a little bit more at the community partners in this project. So I'll start with Angel. What does a successful project, so this Better Bus project that the city is working on Fayetteville Street, what would be a successful project from your perspective?
Well, a successful project would absolutely and intentionally include equitable engagement, equitable community engagement. Again, we work directly with residents through the Fayetteville Street Corridor Fellows Project. And what those fellows do is, for example, they go out and take the Better Bus Project survey and take it directly to the people. So we set up at 2 sites this year, at New Visions of Africa, which is just up the street, and then at the other end of our site visits at the Chicken Hut. We started our project with them because last year during the pandemic, Durham Public Schools put out a schedule just showing, where the feeding sites would be so that school kids could still get meals during the pandemic. Especially at that time, nobody knew what was going on. We just knew that people still needed to be able to eat. And our team of residents determined that we wanted to connect to that schedule and find those places where food sovereignty and security were offered in the neighborhood. And these are always organizations or people who are already doing these things. That's what we've been able to find as we canvass and do research within the community as well, is that this work is already being done in these spaces because people take care of each other. So what we did after the first year of just piloting and canvassing the community was we were intentional and partnered with Sean, who's been great for us, to develop a form of community engagement where we would already go to these sites. People were coming there for the free food. New Visions of Africa offers food boxes and meals Monday through Friday from 3 to 6. And then on Sunday, they give residents or whoever shows up a food box. The Chicken Hut does something very similar. Particularly on Friday from 12 to 1, they offer free food to anybody who lines up. So a lot of homeless people or people with who live in zero-car households, low income or folk who live in public housing, These are the people that we are looking to engage because they're the ones who figure out how to survive or thrive with little or no resources. And these are the people who are also the experts of this neighborhood, the experts about the bus schedule and those things being effective and what needs to change in order for the systems to be effective. The sidewalks and the crosswalks or lack thereof. We get that kind of information. And so what we found with the Better Bus Project early on is that we were able to get people to complete the survey at a much faster rate, and also pretty much mostly Black and brown folk who historically in the city of Durham have been made to feel like, okay, this language is not for me, I don't know what's going on. And the city has said, oh, well, these people don't fill out the surveys. So what we did was we found a solution to that. And we also found that there were some issues in terms of technology use or technological literacy, also just literacy in general. So we had systems in place based on the feedback to find out whether or not we could guide residents through this survey, guide them through the language, or if this was something that we could have them set up and do on their own. And it did make a big difference. We were told, I think maybe toward the end, because we pushed the survey through Juneteenth, and we were told that there was 45%, and you can correct me on this, Sean, about 45% participation from the Black community, which was also a record for the city of Durham in terms of getting that feedback. So a successful project on the Fayetteville Street corridor relies heavily on equitable community engagement because, again, this lived experience, the frustration with the bus not being on time or not being accessible, and a lot of our residents have said, just so they could get to work on time and not be fired during the pandemic, they've taken a Lyft that cost them maybe $20 one way, and they don't even make $15 an hour. It's about maintaining that job so that they can have some form of security. When you think about that, those numbers don't even add up. It's ridiculous. So we have been working actively to continue to help create solutions together with residents. Again, the Fayetteville Street Corridor Fellows live right here on the Fayetteville Street Corridor. I live about 10 minutes, a 10-minute walk northwest of this building. And we're talking to our neighbors and all those things just on a regular basis to help increase social mobility, number one, but also having our neighbors' voices heard in public engagement, at public hearings, the various things. And one of the things that we tend to do as I wrap this up is even for a meeting like this, we encourage people who are not normally shopping or operating in this particular community to take the bus here, walk to these various places, and you'll see what our neighbors have to deal with. You'll get to embody the crosswalks and again, the lack thereof. You'll get to embody, how unsafe it is when there's not regular maintenance here. You'll get to embody the frustration of parking in places and not necessarily having a lot of choices to go and dine or to shop for grocery, those various things, because when this community seems as if there's a stalled mobility or there's a decreased mobility because of the conditions brought on by Highway 147 coming through this neighborhood, you see that people start to feel like it's unsafe and it's hard to navigate. And so it's important to be able to embody what our neighbors, who are the experts of this area, and what needs to be done to solve these problems. It's important to embody what they experience every day so that there can be change made. We are noticing that, the construction, which I'm all for in terms of the bike lanes and the various things that are happening, they're happening in a way that is still not equitable because they're happening because people who are not black or brown or historically a part of this neighborhood are moving to these areas. Bikers are riding through the American Tobacco Trail across Fayetteville Street and looking at the bus stops over there and things that have not been maintained or upgraded. It doesn't feel safe and it doesn't look safe. You have a lot of people who are out there sitting at those bus stations, and there's just so much I could say about that. But we noticed that improvements happen quickly because there are a lot of people who are moving into the neighborhood. It is being revitalized. It's also being gentrified. And so these systems are taking place, or they're being improved, not because, oh, we want to do what's the right thing for the residents in this neighborhood, but we want to do the right thing because that's how gentrification works. Change comes along with the privilege that people moving into the community bring with them. And that's where we want to be able to address success and how we can bridge communications and connections around, like, what would that look like if we had the equity associated with the revitalization of this community.
Phillip, did you want to share from North Carolina Central's perspective, just what you see as a successful project in this?
Well, I would like to echo some of the points that were made. I think the biggest benefit to us is that as we see a successful project, one, it's becoming very difficult to make parking on campus. As I mentioned earlier, we have a number of construction projects, and it's that inevitable tension between we want to build here, but there's a parking lot. So as we plan new facilities, that question that I get typically a lot when I'm on the planning facilities committee, and at the same time I get it from the students and the faculty as well. So for us, we're going to have to rely on other infrastructure, i.e. transit, bike lanes, additional sidewalks to allow for students not only just to navigate in and around our campus, but if they, as they live or rent, a lot of students, when they get to be juniors, they want to live off campus. And so we need to make sure our, not just our infrastructure, but one thing I did fail to mention, we also operate a transit circular on our campus. So now last year we were averaging about 20 to 25 riders. That was during the pandemic. So far we're up to about 400 riders a day because we've grown as a campus. So we're back to, we're not quite back to where we were in 2019 at a peak of 500 riders per day, but we're getting back there. So the point that I'm getting at is as they circulate around the campus, they connect with GoDurham, or they connect with, if they want to ride bikes on the campus, or and of course connect with the American Tobacco Trail and some of the other venues in and around the city. We want to make sure that they have choice, they have options, and that everything is not only integrated, but they have the ability to make a choice versus be able to not do, I guess, be forced to do it, I guess is really what I'm saying. But that's for us, this project connects to us from that angle, and that is making sure that people have choice. And I always emphasize too, emphasize our faculty and staff, but we do have a lot of faculty and staff who live in and around the university as well. So I reference students a lot, but I think about them having lived in the community as well, having that option as well to, as was mentioned earlier, having a safe or a bus shelter or adequate lighting around the bus stop. Time is changing this weekend. So the last couple of years, we've seen this when the time changes, especially when it goes back an hour because it's dark at 5 o'clock. The increase in concerns about lights at the bus stop becomes an issue, especially on our campus, but I'm sure along Fayetteville Street as well. So that's something that we feel like should be a partnership, and we like to work makes, we're going to work together on making this project a success.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the different perspectives. I hope folks are seeing that, success can mean different things to different people depending on your perspective, but I think a lot of them are aligned. They may have different reasons, but if you put them all together, it makes for a pretty compelling case, I think. We did get one question via the chat online, which is a pretty simple one, but I'll give this, I think, for Sean, which is just asking what the funding is for this project, both in terms of the planning and construction. They were wondering if it's 50-50 local state or what it is. Yeah.
So right now, we've secured funding for the planning and design, identification of improvements, and then engagement with the community. We've heard from the community that they're dissatisfied with the lack of things like crosswalks, with improvements at stop locations, things like the landing area, shelters, benches. So what our team is doing now is saying, and you'll see, I think, on the handout for the tour today, these are some of the types of improvements that we've identified. And what we want to hear from the community is, are we on the right track? Is this responsive? We think that we heard you, but maybe we didn't, or maybe we're missing a big piece, or maybe how we're approaching this is not the right way. So making sure that we have that engagement and that we're including community members who have been historically excluded from the process is really critical. As we move forward, if we are on the right track, I hope we are, but we're not going to move forward unless we hear from the community that we are on the right track. Then we are working with the Durham County Transit Plan. We have a half-cent sales tax here in Durham that is available for transit, both service and capital improvements. So we're in the process of updating the types of investments that we want to select for that revenue source for the next 20 years right now. There is a placeholder in that tentative plan for this project, but we also think that we need to be seeking other types of funding to really leverage and maximize the resources from the Durham County Transit Plan. So that's why for the Durham Station project that I mentioned earlier, we're applying for a federal grant this month. Earlier this year, we applied for a federal grant to help us with the Village Transit Center in East Durham. So we're very fortunate to have this local sales tax revenue available to us, but we know that that's not going to be enough to deliver all of the projects that our community needs, and so we're seeking other types of support. And we're really excited about the opportunities, and if Congress can ever pass this infrastructure bill, we think a lot of our projects, particularly with the strong equity focus that we're hearing from this administration, will be very good candidates for funding under the new infrastructure program. So we have local funds, but we're trying to leverage those funds and stretch them as far as we can by bringing in additional revenue sources.
Great, thank you for that. Are there any questions from those here in person in Durham? Yes, start with you.
So I have a question about sort of an equity question. So you talked a little bit about economic development on Fayetteville Street, and how are you dealing with the likely involuntary displacement of residents who already live there? So, for instance, you talked about how new homes are going to be hit. Well, presumably, people who used to live there were pushed out or left voluntarily. But the thing is, with transportation projects like these, especially, I'm thinking of the gateway area of Charlotte, for instance, where you put in a new transit system and there's massive gentrification and dislocation in the area and a huge homeless problem. I lived in Portland, Oregon for 18 years, and they have a massive homeless problem, partly because the
Thank you for the question. And just to repeat for those online very quickly, the question was really about how do you work with the community to address any gentrification or pressure that comes with major transportation projects like this one? So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. I'll start out by saying one thing, one of the reasons that the equitable engagement blueprint is in place, one of the reasons why is because a few residents within the city of Durham, at a grassroots effort, engaged the community around getting something in place to take to city council to say, this project, this one particular project that's, you know, in the works now and was in the works at the time is going to displace people. We need for the city of Durham to establish a document, an equitable and community engagement document that's authentic and authentically goes out and talks to neighbors and community members who are going to be impacted and potentially displaced so that they can make an informed decision to show up for certain public hearings or various things. Otherwise, this information is hidden in plain sight. The Equitable Engagement Blueprint that's now on, I believe it's the engagedurham.org website, highlights the fact that this engagement process is really important because we are trying to mitigate the instances of people being displaced. There's also a working policy group within the City of Durham's planning department to address these issues of infrastructure, affordable housing, education, all of the things that have been illuminated by the pandemic. I say illuminated because these things have been happening in marginalized communities for as long as they've existed. However, the pandemic has really highlighted how grave these inequities are. And when everybody, those who are not marginalized historically, experience the same thing, there's this development of the empathy and the compassion that needs to take place in order to solve these problems together as a community. So there's this equalization that's happening. And my hope is that through this initiative that the planning department is leading right now, we really do come up with solutions, not just use the language and the buzzwords and translate those words to our neighbors, but that there's really action behind the words that we use. I think that we're all used to hearing equity, inclusion, diversity, and all the things. And just because you can use those words, it doesn't mean that you are capable or actually doing anything with those words and how they're defined. So we're looking for that kind of change to take place.
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, this is an issue that our community is confronting really broadly. And this is an example of where we really need strong partnerships. This is not just a transportation issue. It involves affordable housing and community development. And so the city's undertaken a broad-based initiative called Forever Home Durham. It's at foreverhomedurham.com. And it's looking at a whole array of different approaches to make sure that residents, particularly longtime Durham residents, continue to have access to affordable housing, livable and inclusive housing. It's a $160 million campaign that's funded through a bond referendum. So that really represents the bulk of our community's effort to ensure that as we make improvements in our community, that longtime residents still have affordable, livable, and inclusive housing opportunities here in Central Durham.
Thank you. That's a great question, and I appreciate the responses. Are there other questions? Yes, in the back. So the question for those online was asking about the half-cent sales tax for public transportation in Durham County and when that was passed. I'll actually go ahead and answer that one. So that was, the referendum occurred in 2011, so it's actually exactly 10 years old now. It was a successful referendum, and that, along with the referendum, there was the Durham County Transit Plan that sort of detailed how those funds would be spent over the next, 15, 20 years. So it's for a half-cent sales tax, and it brings in, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 to $35 million a year in Durham County. There's also was an increase in the vehicle registration fees. So every time your vehicle, if you own a vehicle, you can look on that line item. You'll see some money goes for transit. So that actually got increased a little bit. There was an existing fee and it got increased. And then there was an existing vehicle rental tax that also goes into that pot of funds. So it was successful in 2011. It actually wasn't enacted until 2013. Durham wanted to wait for one of the adjacent counties to join them. And so Orange County had a successful referendum in 2012. And so the money started coming in 2013. And then Wake County in 2016 passed a similar referendum. And at the time, most of that money was being set aside for the light rail project, or being spent on the light rail project. And with the end of that project in 2019, there's an update happening right now to that Durham Transit Plan to decide how that money should now be spent, the money that was set aside for light rail. And so some of it is going to projects like this one on Fayetteville Street. And just speaking on my behalf or on behalf of the Transit Equity Campaign, I think we would like to see, even more being spent on projects that really benefit people quickly, that get infrastructure out that makes it safer and more inviting for people to use transit in Durham, and in particular focusing on low wealth communities of color and on transit riders. One of the unfortunate things is that it has been 10 years, and we have seen some improvements, like the 15-minute service that Sean mentioned, and some additional bus stops, but it hasn't been enough, and so we really need to see more progress quickly. Are there other questions? Yes. Sorry, can you repeat the last part? Oh, across what? Sorry. Okay. So the question was about asking what a student who's currently in engineering or planning or transportation in any form, just something that they, with the panelists, would like those students to know about how best to work within the transit system.
So I'll start out by saying that we're hiring. So send me your resume, sean.egan@durhamnc.gov. We're looking for talent. Like I said, we're trying to grow our delivery capacity. We have an incredible opportunity with the resources that we have available, the needs that we have in this community. I've been in this space for over a decade now. I've never seen the opportunity to really address, to really understand, get that equitable engagement, to get a strong understanding of what the community needs are, and then to have the resources to actually be able to advance and deliver the projects. This is an extraordinary opportunity. And so I really want to encourage people to think about this and recognize how important this work is. And we have the opportunity to really transform the experience of our transit riders, to move transportation planning and design away from a focus on vehicles and to focus on people. You know, we see 33, 34 passengers per hour on our buses. So that one vehicle is, you know, serving 30 plus people at a time. We want to prioritize the space and the needs of those 30 people who are on that bus and move away from the tradition in transportation planning and design of focus on vehicles, moving vehicles at high speed, high throughput, and really focus on the people who are riding. And so person throughput, what are the ways that we can maximize the person throughput, make the most efficient use of this space, and really serve the needs of some of the most vulnerable users in our community. So yeah, send me a resume.
I'll just offer just a quick answer too and pass the mic. I just recently completed my teaching artist certificate at North Carolina Central University as a conceptual teaching artist in urban planning and community development. So I really love your question. And what I would want an engineering student to know, which is, you know, when we combine or integrate disciplines, one of those disciplines is engineering. We talk about zoning and planning and how all those things work together. So I would want you to know that, especially when it comes to equitable community engagement, it's labor, and it's normally a labor of love that community members already do. But the way that we're doing this work, it is a full-on organization and a lot of work that people are beginning to see, okay, well, I can dedicate this amount of time to it. And the fact that we do have a capacity that Sean had mentioned earlier to do this, and it is specialized, is really important. What we don't have is the resources or the money that we need to make sure that everybody who's doing this work is continuously taken care of. The work that we've done so far has been made possible by a seed grant, which has been great, but it is a seed grant. And so it's important to be able to recognize what it takes for the people that you are seeing doing the community engagement, because there are a lot of barriers that we have to work through and turn around and help to resolve so that we can create effective feedback loops. So yeah, I want you to know that it's important to be able to develop that acknowledgement and recognition for the expertise that lived experience provides, but also how we can increase resources so that that work can continue at that specialized level.
I want to echo what Sean and Angel just said. I would also add to it, one piece of advice I was given when I was beginning my career, my geography professor actually told me this, and that is connect the dots to history. And that is, why was something built in the first place? So that you can, and so we talked about the Durham Freeway, and I never forget, in Greensboro, US 29 runs adjacent to the A&T campus. If you go up Gate City Boulevard, you literally have to turn into a neighborhood in order to get on to US 29. I believe it's O. Henry Boulevard. That was one of the projects he took us to back in the 90s to show, okay, when you build a highway and you literally you see trucks going through someone's neighborhood to get to a highway, and how do you correct it? So by that, he was showing us how to, you know, understand what policies were in place, why it was built in the first place. So, and then of course, the challenge to us was, okay, you're a planner, you're a geographer, you're going to be a city manager, whatever you're going to be. Your job is going to, you know, understand that so that you can create or provide a blueprint to look at how you can improve it. And that's sort of what we've talked about today with Fayetteville Street. And that would be certainly as you start moving forward with your career, connect the dots by understanding why this was done in the first place. What's the history behind it? Ultimately, you don't want to repeat it, but and that's certainly the goal of that. But the other side of that is how do you correct it and make it better, make it greater, make it conducive to the time that we live in now, where people live differently, we operate differently than we did in the 1960s and 70s when that was the trend.
Sure. I think maybe just the final thing that I would add is I think the days of becoming an engineer and only doing engineering are gone. If you're becoming an engineer, you're also doing community engagement and planning, and you're thinking about all these aspects because they, as we have talked about, this session, is that they all impact, what the engineering ultimately is, and vice versa. The engineering also greatly impacts, the community development and everything. So it really is, it's a profession and a field that has so many inputs, and so I think it's just important to make sure that when you're looking at something that you try to bring in as many viewpoints as you can.
Thanks. And now, oh yeah, go ahead.
One more thing for the engineering student. What we've done just recently is we've started to attend the Better Bus Project tech meetings. And the reason why we've done that is so that we can understand the language and figure out how to translate that language to our neighbors so they understand what's happening with the construction that's going on, and can also give, again, authentic feedback based on the fact that some of these projects have well been in place way before they even know about them. So we get to be able to talk about what's happening, and also we're able to talk about how we can be at the forefront of some of these things in the future. So that language interpretation and translation is really important for us too.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that we've really tried to focus on is we love acronyms, for example. So we talk about ADT and VMT and CAD AVL. And when we think about, we say that we've excluded community members from the decision-making process. The language that we use excludes people. If we don't use language that's accessible, understandable, when we're talking about what we're trying to do, even if you're talking to the right person, you're still excluding that person from really developing and understanding and participating in that decision-making process. So it's something that we come back to over and over again, but it's one of these subtle ways that people feel shut out of the process by the language that we use, getting hung up on technical jargon and acronyms and abbreviations, and we really need to be mindful that that is a path to excluding people, even if you're face-to-face with that person in conversation. If you're not presenting information in an accessible way, then you're not really including that person in the process.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have just a couple things to add as well. I think the first is to create relationships, and particularly with people or communities that you don't normally create relationships with. And a lot of times that can be maybe a little scary at first, and a lot of times those communities are not going to trust you at first, and nor should they. But if you stick at it, if you are there all the time and continuing to try to build those relationships, that can make a huge difference. Join an advocacy group. I'll put that out there. Either statewide groups such as BikeWalkNC, Bike Durham. We have a transit equity campaign. There's always a lot of advocacy going on, I'd say, probably in every city in North Carolina in particular, and statewide. And then my biggest thing is to use transit, right? If you want to understand transit, you have to use it. So, try it out. Use different systems. Different systems are different. Go Triangle is a very different system from GoDurham, which is very different from Duke Transit, for example. They have different missions. There are different people riding. They're riding for different reasons. And understanding, what works, what doesn't work. You can look at numbers all you want and look at maps all you want, but until you actually experience it with the people who are riding every day, it can be really hard to fully understand it, in my opinion. So that's all the time we have. I want to first give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much. I also want to recognize the organizers of this event. I think they've put on a really fantastic summit, and particularly given the continued challenges of the pandemic, putting on a summit that is both in person and virtually, I know is very, very difficult. So I also want to give a huge round of applause to them as well. Thank you very much.
At HDR, we're passionate about making North Carolina a better place to walk and roll. Our Salem Parkway project in Winston-Salem upgraded a downtown greenway, integrated a bike and pedestrian tunnel into a highway reconstruction project, and delivered 2 signature bridges. From planning to construction, we're ready to help you imagine, design, and deliver the next generation of bicycle and pedestrian projects for our communities.
Hi, I'm Lisa Regal with AARP North Carolina. We enjoy working with BikeWalkNC as we work to make our active transportation safer through efforts like the Bicycle Safety Quiz, Vision Zero, and Complete Streets.